Hey everybody, it's Chaunine. Just getting ready to put some of the finishing touches on this piece before I glue everything down, and it's going to be done soon. I thought it might be fun for me to share some of how I do that. So this is one of my very favorite mediums to work with. I really like using cut paper to create the images. I love the dimension that I'm able to create and the different textures, and I'm kind of using paper instead of paint to lay the images down on the canvas, with the exception of the background. I did paint the background with acrylic paint. I painted and textured the canvas before I started cutting up the images and figuring out where I wanted them to go on the canvas. And funny enough, when I'm working on a piece like this, creating the images is not the hard part for me. The most difficult part for me is settling on what papers I'm going to use to cut the images out of. These are some of the papers that I settled on for this piece. If you take a look here, this is the paper that I used to tear up and make the ground here. And it started kind of like that, but I actually wanted it to have even more dimension, and so I got some stamps and kind of stamped along the bottom, and then took that and tore it up and made the ground that you see here. And it can take me several hours sometimes to pick out the papers that I'm going to use for a piece. If you look here, this is just part of my paper collection. So I'll go through and find browns or creams. I've got my reds, greens, blues, and pull out all the different options that I'm considering and kind of hold them up next to each other. Just figure out what exactly it is that I'm trying to achieve. I'm looking usually for certain hues, plus it's important to me what images are on the paper. I kind of like to play with images within the images if possible. I think that's fun. And another thing that I really like about this medium is that it gives you a chance to kind of try a few things and see if you really like where you're going with it before anything is laid down and permanent. I posted a couple pictures of some of the options I was working with when I first started the piece. She was a redhead. I was cutting her hair out of this beautiful red, and I had a real deep maroon, and then I created this green dress with this pretty musical paper, but when I laid it out on the canvas, it just wasn't really what I was looking for. But it's really fun to be able to create a couple options for yourself and lay them down on the canvas and figure out what it is that you think works best. And I really like where this is at right now. So one of the next steps for me is finishing up some of these fun little stars that are part of the magic that's going on here. And I have one of them here. And what needs to happen with this little guy, when I cut the shapes out, they have a real stark white edge. I don't know if the camera can quite pick that up. And what I like to do is add some shading to the edges. It really gives it some nice dimension. And if I leave the white edge, it kind of breaks that illusion. It just is a real nice effect when I put the dimension, the depth, the shading on the edges. So there's a couple ways that I do that. Sometimes I will take a real small paintbrush and lightly paint it onto the edges. But there's another technique I'm going to show you that I also like to use. It's fun. It goes a little faster. And with small pieces like this, it's nice to do. So what I do is I have these little, they're called powder puffs. They're kind of pads of paint, and they're a little bit like an ink pad. They're actually exactly like an ink pad. And this one is kind of new. I think that edge is a little bit too sharp for what I'm going to be doing. me see. Let's use this one. This one, you can see, I've used and abused it. It's nice and soft and kind of torn up, which means I'll really be able to get the edges of that little star in there. So what I do is I take the piece and I just really start to work the edges of it along to cover up that white. And I'll also kind of drag the edges along like this. Let's see if the camera can pick that up. You see the dimension that that's adding to this cute little star? It starts to really make the color pop, and instead of just a little yellow star, now it's really looking dimensional and golden. So I'll do that until I feel like I've got some real good dimension on there, and sometimes it's hard to get fully into the little white, the little edges in there. There's still some white hiding there. So a lot of times what I'll do is I will take one of these distress markers, and that's almost like a brush there. I'll take it and I'll darken the edges. I just have to be really careful. When you do that, it's really easy to slip and make a mark across the piece that you've been working on. And then you got to start all over. So I've got one more cute little star here now to work with. And once those are all glued down and laid out where I want them, the very last step will be to paint in the pixie dust. I really want, this piece is called Casting Wishes into the Wind, and I really want this to be soft and magical and pixie dustish, and I haven't done that before. So I have a technique that I use when I want to see what something is going to look like and kind of test it out on a piece, help me map out where I want to go with it. I use a sheet of tracing paper, and I kind of get some of the main elements down so I can line it up. You can see that. I've kind of line the tracing up with where things are at. And what that allows me to do is start sketching some lines right there, right on the paper. I can kind of work out how it is that I want these magical swirls to go. You can kind of see those. It lets me erase and rework them, and I can see the piece through the tracing paper, so I can see what that's going to look like if I were to lay it down like that. And I think I've finally gotten this to a place where I like it. So I will transfer these swirls onto the canvas and start to paint the pixie dust. When I am doing something like that, I haven't painted pixie dust quite like this before, and normally on a piece, I won't try something new on a piece, especially when it's in a phase like this. So to test it out, earlier this morning, I kind of worked some things out on a smaller canvas. I painted it in similar colors, and what this allows me to do, I do a lot of these little test pieces, and sometimes my test pieces turn out to be really fun pieces that, you know, you kind of have some fortunate accidents sometimes, and I really discover some fun things. But what it allows me to do is experiment and play and make my mistakes, and when I'm done, I can take the parts that I think worked really well. It lets me leave the stuff that didn't work so well behind, and I can work out what I want to do before I actually put it on the final piece. So here's a sneak preview. I like how that turned out. I think for the most part that's how it's going to look on the canvas when I transfer this. So there's a sneak peek. Hopefully very soon you'll be seeing the finished piece, and I hope you enjoyed kind of having a peek into how this process works. And I'll make another video for you soon. And have a good night, everybody. Bye.